Hello. So, hi. So I'm Antra, and I and Zarina just standing at the door. We are from Brighton Cloud, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's been quite cold, so I really appreciate you guys joining us today. So up today, we have, we already have arrived and networked. So 6:30, we're going to start with this session. Later on, we have Zarina talking about our sponsors, a bit more intro about who we are, what we do, and everything else. 6:45, we're aiming to have a wonderful speaker, Dr. Blay, joining us and talking about ethical AI, professionalism, what we should keep in mind while doing AI and cloud. And then, yes, after that, we're going to have a small networking session again. So just for you know, this event is recorded and broadcasted live as well. So if you want to see the live again, you can go to our page and you can view it there. So for those of you who haven't seen our LinkedIn page, so we do have a LinkedIn community, a page and a group where you can join as a member, share your content, feel free to share anything there. We do have a QR. If you could scan that, that would lead to the LinkedIn page on Brighton Cloud. If you're posting about this event, don't forget to tag us with Brighton Cloud and hashtag Brighton Cloud on LinkedIn as well. So following that, we also have a Slack community for Silicon Brighton. So I'm not sure if you guys know, we are a very big community of Silicon Brighton, and then Brighton Cloud is part of that. So we do have Slack community and our own meetup page. So just in case if you are not aware of that, you can scan these QRs, and that would lead to respective channels. I'm going to leave that for a few seconds if someone is scanning, and then we're going to move on. Yes, with that, I'll call Zarina, my wonderful host, to talk about call for speakers.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Zarina Bansby here, one of the co-organizers of Brighton Cloud. So we've got an exciting lineup that we've had over the past couple of years since I've been involved in Brighton Cloud, and before that as well. But what we're looking at doing is shaping what we want to see for 2026. It seems odd saying 2026 already, doesn't it? But we're looking for members of the community who would like opportunities to speak, be part of panels, fireside chats, workshops, demos, anything like that. Please, if you're interested, do scan that QR code. We like a good QR code, you will see. And register your interest in regards to anything that you want to be part of, or just reach out to myself or Antra via LinkedIn. But yeah, hoping to get some really great sessions. Been really loving some of the stuff that we've been doing as well with collaborations with other groups, which you'll see a little bit more about in a second. So big thank you to our events-based sponsor, Runway East. So really fantastic venue. If you haven't already seen it, I'm a big fan of that disco room. Good for videos and pictures and stuff like that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll wait till afterwards in order to have a look at there. But yeah, thank you very much, Runway East. For food and drinks, for this event, is the first one, is actually sponsored by me. So, you've got a few different animations to come through. So this is launching soon. I'm calling it Zarina Cloud, hence the cloud little thing in general. But essentially, it's not a business or anything like that, but it's just more a repository, an ecosystem of things that I'm involved in or things that I think are cool. And we'll talk about this later. My definition of cool may not be everyone's definition. At the moment, this is just going to my LinkedIn page. And then what I'll have there is a link tree. So it's all the different things, and I'll give you a little flavor of the things that I'm involved in and that I think is really great for people to be aware of. So the first one is I'm a committee member for the BCS, that's a Chartered Institute for IT, formerly known as the British Computer Society, inside their Enterprise Architecture Specialist Group. So I post a lot of stuff in regards to events that they have, which are virtual. Most of them are free unless it's the annual conference. So if you're into architecture, all different types from solutions, enterprise, business, security, cloud, even though it says enterprise, it's all aspects of architecture because we're the BCS's only architecture professional group. Otherwise, you've also got Brighton Cloud, and we're hopefully relaunching Cloud Bites, which is little bite-sized 60-second talks in regards to what's new in the world of cloud. I've also got a Dev 2, normally in the unofficial, official AWS Community Builder section of Dev 2, where I post some content. My main area that I do outwardly tends to be about professional certifications and development, and this is across all different ecosystems. You can see there that I'm a Women Tech Maker Ambassador for Google, so I'll post some how to skill up in terms of the Google certifications and different talks from there. Like Carl and some other people that we know from the different communities across Silicon Brighton, I'm one of the AWS community builders as well. And one of the things that I've probably not mentioned before inside this forum is that I'm a co-founder of a community interest group called Architect Her. Architect Her, we have events mainly around London, but it's more about getting more people into the world of architecture. And unfortunately, not the type my mum wishes I was, which is if I can plan the extension. Can't do that. Technology architecture. And of course, the last one here is just more in terms of when I mentioned before, what I think is cool may not be. Random content. So with my son, we like Lego. I'm not sure if you've heard the term adult fan of Lego, but we've also got content like this coming up. Next slide. Just a bit of fun, essentially. So I spent a fortune on Lego, particularly around the Jurassic World and Jurassic Park franchise and Star Wars. So essentially, we just get minifigures and take pictures and do memes. My son's 12. I think it's hilarious, and it justifies the cost of buying these wonderful, wonderful things that he's only getting because I'm purchasing. But just a little bit in terms of introducing myself to the group and the community. That's a little bit about me. Right, so let's talk about Silicon Brighton that we spoke about. So so Silicon Brighton are hosts of Brighton's tech sector, and we've got loads and loads and loads of different groups that we support. A couple call out to certain ones. Obviously, you've got the AWS Brighton user group, you've got Brighton AI, you've got us in the middle, you've also got Coding for Carers, People, Culture, and loads of different groups in order to have a look. But have a look, especially in regards to Slack. And actually, I think there might be a Linktree group QR code in a second. We'll go to that later. So one thing we want to do is say a big thank you to our sponsors as part of Silicon Brighton. You have a host of them here, which is really fantastic to get that much engagement, especially within the local community for the tech sector. In particular, a big shout out to certain ones. So we've got James Chase, and we've also got Plus Accounting, and we've also got More Law and Arity as well. And this Linktree QR code will take you to lots of information in regards to Silicon Brighton. So we'll let it hover there for now before we go on to the talk. So for today's talk, we've got Ethical AI in the Cloud, Responsibility, Professionalism, and the Challenge of Distributed Accountability by Dr. Blay Whitby. Blay, you are leading a voice in AI and robotics. You're a leading voice in AI and robotics ethics. You're advisor to the Royal Academy of Engineering and the EU, and former chair of the BCS, so that's Chartered Institute for IT at Sussex. And you've had teaching positions in a host of lots of different places, including the University of Sussex and the Brighton Medical School. What we'll just do is swap over the presentation link, so then we've got your session, so we've got your presentation up, and invite you up for your session. Thank you. Just like that, magic.
I'm wearing a mic. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I don't know if I can live up to the introduction, but I'll do what I can. I'm going to sort of slightly sabotage myself in my talk, so watch out for that. Essentially, I'm going to say, this is what ethical AI looks like. Be good boys and girls, and then I'm going to say good luck with that in the current web. I often hear it compared to the Wild West, but I think by people who don't know much about the American West, I'm going to say it's far worse than that. much worse now. I'm sorry to be pedantic, but I'm afraid it is. Okay, disclaimer, they're all my opinions. These are organizations that I'm associated with in various ways, and you can ask me about them. I'm only 3 weeks, I think, or 4 weeks away out of being chair of BCS Sussex local branch. And not using AI was quite a struggle. I counted a regular Google search as AI, right? Forget the AI companions, but I did allow myself to use search algorithm on my own files and my previous talks. So it's maybe a slightly arbitrary definition of AI, because some people would say all search is AI. But I certainly didn't use Claude or anything like that. And later in the talk, you'll see why I had to do that. I spent a lot of time plowing through paper, books, and dictionary of quotations and things like that. But the reason I did that was because I want to say I take responsibility for all these ideas. Right? They're Blay Whitby's ideas, for better or worse. And you'll see why I think it was important not to use AI to prepare the talk. It's not that I don't know much about AI. I completely mistimed my career in that I published a book on AI ethics in 1988. It's not a mistake, right? It's just several decades too soon. And to sum up that book in a sentence, right, this is what I said. I said governments and lawyers all have their jobs, but looking at previous technologies, I talked a lot about the Titanic, and I'm happy to take questions on that. I talked a lot about brakes on passenger trains in the late Victorian period and so on. Looking at previous technologies, waiting for the government is foolish, because they're very late into the game, and then they make very heavy-handed legislation. And if you work in the field of IT, you know that most IT legislation is completely, words I better not mention on camera, right? So who's going to make it ethical? Well, the people who do it. The people who actually understand how the technology works, the people who build it. So that's the theme of that book, Be Good Boys and Girls. And therefore, my career, I put a lot of effort into teaching ethics to students at various places, some of which you've seen, and working with BCS, which less than 10 years after that book was published, but still towards the end of the last century, became the Chartered Institute for IT. And that's significant. And also, BCS is committed to professionalism. Right, and that's one of the reasons why I served on BCS Ethics Committee. I was prepared to do the tedious job of being chair of the local branch and so on, because I really do think that the IT profession should behave more like a profession and less like a bunch of enthusiasts. You don't have to agree. In fact, I doubt if anybody does agree. It's been very difficult. So, basic requirement of a profession, right, is a code of doing it right. Anybody remember any? Any going to throw any codes at me? Anybody use them in their daily work? And interesting that, isn't it? I mean, several were mentioned in the web flyer for this talk, including ACM, they've got a good code, IEEE, not my favorite, but it's an effective code. But I should probably push the company line here and talk for BCS, right? And all right, conflict of interest, I'll declare here. I was in that room when these slogans were derived, right? So obviously I'm going to say this. I rather like the first one, right? And as I say, I was in that room. I'm not claiming credit for any of this, right? And you can get the full code of conduct there. And actually, these slogans were meant to make it easy for you to remember, right? And most codes of conduct for engineering just follow those 4 principles, right? You have a duty to the public good, you have a duty of competence, right? Right, so you only do jobs that you're competent to do. You have a duty to the organization you work for, and you have a duty to the profession, right? If you do a bad job, and I'm going to go through as many examples of bad jobs as you like, right? If you do a bad job, you don't just hurt yourself and the organization you work for, you degrade the profession. You make the whole IT profession look bad. Hence the 4 slogans. But it's the same for mechanical engineers, it's the same for electrical engineers. Most engineering codes of conduct work just like that. I'd like you make IT for everyone because it's so often forgotten, right? And so, I've spent a career in universities saying to, making students put blindfolds on and saying, now use the website. Now use the website you designed, Here's a question for you. Can your system be used by blind people? Just asking, right? You make IT for everyone. And other implications of that are, if someone gets it wrong, right, that's your fault, not theirs. Right? Seriously. But blaming the user has become such a tradition for basically bad code or unusable systems. Anybody going to be at UX Brighton on Friday? Look at you, Zarina. You said they were one of your sponsors. I'm just hoping that I'm not standing around on my own. I'm going to be at UX Brighton on Friday. And while we're on UX and making IT for everyone, let me just throw this out. Right? It wasn't BCS or well-meaning people in the industry that created the discipline of UX. You all know what UX is and how it works. No, that was competition, marketing competition on the web. Because if your website is hard to use, people go click and go buy from someone else. That's what generated the discipline of UX. And before then, usability was something that people in the profession really weren't interested in. And I would still say, I every day meet systems that are unspeakable from a usability point of view. But you make IT for everyone, or do you? Or are you just making it for yourself? Think about it. And also think about if you do a bad job, and a lot of people have done, well, I'm coming up to it, a lot of people have done, then you degrade the whole profession. Right. Okay. Question, I'm not going to answer this one. Is it a profession? Right. When BCS became the Chartered Institute for IT, there was a pushback. People in the British Computer Society said, no, we don't want to be a profession. We want to be a group of amateurs who are just enthusiastic about computers. There was quite a pushback. There was quite an argument. There was blood on the carpet. I know, I was there. Right? And you won't find much about it on the web, but trust me, I was there. We're coming to that. Right? There's a lot of stuff that isn't on the web for various reasons, but I was there. There was a lot of pushback. And I should mention that the fact that it's got a royal charter, right, means that they have a chartering qualification, like other engineering organizations. You can be CITP, Chartered Information Technology Professional. And the BCS has managed to persuade the government that every project manager on a government project should be at least CITP qualified. So, it's not that the BCS aren't trying to professionalize, but is it a profession? I would guess, remember, I didn't let myself use AI on this, but you can all see what the AI tells you. I would guess that more than half of lawyers are in the Law Society, and something like 80% of doctors are in the BMA. Just guessing, ballpark figures, and I'd guess that fewer than 5% of IT professionals are in BCS. Maybe even less. You're nodding, Zarina. Yeah. Right, so hence, is it a profession? I'm just asking you. And if it is a profession, how professional is it? I'm just asking you. Would you like my opinion? Could do better. So I'm going to do a history of professional responsibility. Like I said, there's been some mess-ups, right? 1992, it's a long time ago. Maybe you're all too young to remember this one, but I remember it, right? Do you all know about the London Ambulance Service disaster? Because I'm happy to rush over it. Okay, they introduced a computer-aided dispatch system, London Ambulance Service computer-aided dispatch, right? Now you might think, oh, 1992, that was cutting-edge technology, GPS location of ambulances, computer control, the algorithm to work out which is the nearest vehicle and send it to an emergency call. You might think, woo, cutting edge in 92, but you'd be wrong, right? There were already, by 1992, 2 ambulance direction systems working in Britain. One in Strathclyde, around Glasgow, and one in the West Midlands, around Birmingham. They'd been built, they were working satisfactorily. So to do one in London, well, it was a big system, but it was not cutting edge, right? But, and here's the interesting gems. The contract didn't go to the companies that had built the successful systems, which meant that they got very sulky and wrote quite scathing things in Computer Weekly. And Computer Weekly often has the dirt on these things. Because it was 92, the government took the cheapest contract, and also, and this is typical of IT, a ridiculously short delivery time, right? It had to be done in a year, right? And I think both the people who'd already done one said, no, it can't be done in a year, so they didn't get the contract. The contract went to a firm called Geobase, and their only previous success was a geographical database for the BBC Micro for use in schools. So they were probably out of their field of competence. But, you know, it's 92. We've learned a lot since then, haven't we? Right? There was no full load testing. The operators who took the phone calls and worked the system didn't see the system till October the 26th. So there was no training of the operators. They were just sat at it and told to work, and screens filled up with vehicle not responding, and they said, what do we do now? Remember, look, disaster is a kind word for this. Serious problems emerged and deaths resulted. Hard to know exactly how many deaths. Some people didn't get an ambulance until 48 hours or more after their phone call, and for a serious condition that could prove fatal. So we're guesstimating deaths. I would guesstimate between 20 and 40 deaths as a result of this system. Okay? The serious problems, among the serious problems with this system were it couldn't handle imperfect data. Hello? Interface issues galore, because the operators had never even seen it before, let alone been, you know, had worked for it. There was a memory leak, which actually in the 90s, most PCs did have a memory leak, right? It came for free, courtesy of Microsoft. Someone's nodding. You remember this? Anybody remember the 90s? So it's not very surprising that it was a memory leak. And then 8 days later, they gave it up. This is a Whitbyism that stands for, this is not an exhaustive list, right? There were other problems. Not impressive. So what happened? Well, heads rolled in the London Ambulance Service. And if we're talking about professionalism, the people who built this system and didn't test it and released it, they all just, you know, polished up their CVs and got jobs elsewhere. Maybe they're still working in IT now, right? Because it wasn't their fault, was it? It was the management's fault. Or, well, that's how it looked. Do you remember this one? This is a lot more recent. Okay. Sale of personal data to political actors. You don't need to hire an ethicist. And if you want to hire one, hello, I'm available. And ethics work is traditionally done for free, because exchange of money would create a conflict of interest. But you only have to ask me, right? You don't need an ethicist to say that taking data from people without their knowing it and selling it on is wrong. Or maybe you do, because a lot of that's happening on the modern web, isn't it? Now, BCS have told me not to talk about this. And And I don't really want to go into why. In fact, I don't want to talk about it, right? Because I'm just going to assume you know all about this one. Okay. Pardon?
Was it implemented by chartered IT professionals?
That's why they don't want me to talk about it. Or that you can go on the BCS website and find their official statement about this. They've sat on it a long time and discussed it, and some of us are a little cross for the very reason you pointed out. And it's definitely not an impressive thing. How professional is it? Oh, do you remember this one? Yeah, only 35 million for something that didn't work. Right now, well, I know what people say. I know what the excuses are. If I get, I know the way the excuses run for this sort of thing, because in the all-party parliamentary group for AI, you get to meet figures from industry who blagged their way into, who've persuaded the government authorities that they are competent to deliver these things. Bear in mind that item 2 in the headlines, you should not offer to do something that you're not competent to provide if you're behaving as a professional. And their excuse is, well, Blay, the government's just such a bad customer. Right? They changed their requirements. Well, you tell me what other field of engineering you're allowed to blame the customer. It's the customer's fault that you couldn't deliver a working product. Right? I mean, do you say that? If you're building a car, do you say, well, yeah, I know it doesn't work, but that's your fault. You weren't clear about what you wanted. Here's the thing. How many of you read the license agreements before you click agree? Oh, well done. At least there's 2 of us, right? If I was in university lecturer mode, I'd say, which part of the words read and carefully do you not understand, right? Well, this licensing agreement, I've just lifted from the operating system for this laptop, right? Seriously. I had to go find it, but I allowed myself to search the laptop. And in fact, by turning it on, I've agreed to this. This is for iOS Sequoia or whatever it is. It's not vintage technology. I bought it from the Apple Store earlier this year, right? And this is what they expect. Right, now, so what have I agreed to? Absolutely nothing. They don't even guarantee that it'll work at all. Fit for no purpose whatsoever.
I think you need a solicitor to understand some things.
Oh, you've looked at the Facebook one then? The Facebook one is designed not to be read, right? That's a challenge. But I recommend the Apple ones because they're readable, or as you can get. They put it in block capitals, the crucial bit, which is here. Satisfactory quality, fitness for a particular purpose. We're not suggesting any of that. And bear in mind, this is for the software that everything else depends on for my presentation tonight. If this doesn't work, this is a brick, right? But this is what we get away with.
How do you make time to read all of these license agreements? Because there's not enough. If you read a word a second.
Yes. You could use AI, but bear in mind, I'm not using every delicious app that somebody throws at me because I'm very suspicious about that sort of thing. And this is just the Apple operating system for this machine, which I'm kind of committed to. And it's not made by an insignificant company. It's not made by a company with a particularly bad reputation. You know, there's no reason to be suspicious, but this is it. Oh, and there are other interesting clauses as well. Like, if you're going to sue us, you have to sue us in Palo Alto, and good luck with that.
Not meeting any of the things that they said it wouldn't do anyway, so.
Very hard to sue. There are other clauses saying don't use it to control a nuclear power station, don't use it for any aviation or space application. There's a whole load of get-outs in it. Interesting, but there you go. So, to sum up on this responsibility, right? If an IT project fails, and an awful lot have done, I mean, again, BCS have a database of projects that have gone wrong. If you go to the BCS website, they'll list 100 or so big projects that have just failed this year. Every year they do this list. So it's no big news item for an IT project to fail. I've just taken some that have been in the news, right? Lots fail all the time, right? And even if they produces fatalities, right, then it's the user's or the purchaser's fault. Doesn't look professional to me. Just saying, a whole load of could do better. Okay, we'll do some social psychology. Anybody heard of the risky shift? No pilots in the audience then. You've got to learn this for your pilot's license, right? And you should really learn it in other applications, but this is an important one. So a whole load of it in the commercial pilot's license. Group decision is more risky than an individual decision. So it's absolute sackable offence for the captain of an airliner to say, the weather's marginal in Toronto. What do you think? Should we try it? In fact, I learned to fly with the RAF, and they taught me this, you know, the harsh way. You know, I was doing an instrument test with the squadron leader, and, you know, somebody senior, and doing the flying. I'm doing the flying, just being examined. It's an examination. I've done a lot of examinations. We'll come to that. And under the radar guidance, I pop out the cloud, more or less over the airfield, but I'm too high to attempt a landing. So meek little 19-year-old Blay says, "Oh, I appear to be too high, sir. Shall I go around?" Calm voice comes from the back of the aircraft. "No, don't. Let's crash." And then afterwards I get, you know, well, I'm sorry, you're at a stage where you should be learning captaincy, right? Probably the reason why, and also, you know, psychology, final year students can set it up as an experiment all the time. It's easy to demonstrate. A group will take a more risky decision than an individual. And a hypothesized reason is you feel less responsibility for it. You see where we're going with this when we talk about responsibility in the cloud. But I mean, this is established psychology. This is established human psychology, right? An individual's much more cautious than a group. Right? And I assume you've all heard of groupthink, right? Because groupthink causes an awful lot of problems. And in any group, in any organization, even if it's only you and 3 mates in your little software company, basic assumptions will not be challenged. It's not done to challenge basic assumptions. Groupthink is deadly and dangerous. But here's the thing I want to say. Large language models are pure, undistilled groupthink. Right, so every response should have these words in front of it. The consensus about that subject on the web seems to be. So if you've sprained your ankle and you say to ChatGPT 4 or Claude or whatever, what should I do about a sprained ankle, right? It's never seen a sprained ankle. It's got no way of knowing what a sprained ankle is. What it's going to tell you is the consensus about that subject on the web seems to be. And that's fine if you think consensus on the web is the truth. It's not, right? The machine has no way of detecting truth or falsehood. It detects consensus. You see why I say it's pure groupthink? And if you're going to throw at me what is truth, because I know you are, right? You said you would. What's truth? I'm going to say, how long have you got? Book me for another talk. There is a talk on SpeakerNet, something like a brief history of truth from Socrates to Trump. I can join the dots, but it's going to take an hour and a half. Right. Pardon?
Where are you doing that talk?
But the truth talk?
Yeah.
Because I want to.
No, where?
It's on offer. No one's. I've got a couple of bookings next summer in Croydon and Wimbledon. But if you want to book me, you look on SpeakerNet. I only want travel expenses, and the reason I'm giving the talk is because I really want to. It's fascinating, right? Although if you think you're going to go out of it knowing what truth is, forget that. You're going to go out of it having a lot more doubts about truth. But I think that's healthy, right? And if you think that consensus on the web is truth, in fact, let's run with that for a bit. Okay, so truth is difficult. Why shouldn't I just be satisfied with consensus on the web? That's good. In fact, I'll repeat an interaction I had with a student a few years back, right? And students Google what you're saying. Maybe you're doing this now while you're saying it. And a student said, Wikipedia says you're wrong about that, right? And I said, yes, I know, someone's got a bee in their bonnet. I keep changing Wikipedia, but they keep changing it back. Trust me, I was there. Right? Like with the BCS code. Trust me, I was there. The student wasn't happy with that. Listen to this. This is what the student said to me. That doesn't matter. You should teach us what's on the web because that's what we'll be expected to know. Now, you might side with me, I was there, or you might side with the student, but this is a choice you're making now every day, right? You buy into the groupthink because that's what you'll be expected to know, or you listen to some old, boring old, you-know-what, like Blay Whitby. Pardon?
Depends who was changing the Wikipedia page.
There's at least one person, at least one very vindictive person got a grudge against me out there, and I've no idea why. Well, if you look at Blay Whitby on Wikipedia and look at the edit history, you'll see it tells the story. But have you noticed there are inherent problems in training only on historical data? And that's what large language models do. What, have we got it up here? No. Do you all know about Amazon's recruitment AI? 2015. It was discovered in 2018. Oh, well, let me tell you about this, because this is an example of an inherent problem type. In 2015, I think, Amazon asked their AI research department, which is based in Edinburgh, by the way, to produce a CV sifting program. The idea is that it would cream off the top 5% of applicants. And it was a feed-forward neural net trained, I think, on 50,000 words when they'd finished with it. Very quickly, and credit to Amazon's AI department for noticing this, within a few months they noticed it had taught itself to be completely sexist. Right? So if I'd put on my CV, I gave a talk at a girls' school last year, which I did, right? That word girls would get my CV binned straight away. Right? Now, no one had programmed it to be so sexist. It had worked this out for itself. Right? And Amazon tried a few tweaks and then gave up. Right? But the bad news is, this is 2025. Recruitment's all done by AI now. The problem with that system, I mean, lots of people have noticed one problem with the Amazon recruitment system, which is data is biased. I used to tell students, all data is biased, which is a slight exaggeration, because if your data set is prime numbers containing more than 10 digits, probably there's not much bias in that. It's just a load of numbers. But if it's data about humans, it will contain bias. There's no doubt about that. And if you train your neural net on this biased data, especially as it's historical data, that's how Amazon did it. They just showed it CVs of successful applicants. You're saying, give me more of that. And AI is very good at giving you more of that. You know, a crummy neural net can do that. Right? Give me more of this, right? Here's more of this. And of course, it might be we can eliminate anyone who's female. So they noticed the bias. And now there's a lot of talk, a lot of people working on bias in data. But they didn't notice that if you train on historical data, you're just doing groupthink. You're not going to get a change, right? Because this is just a statistical scrape over what's already there. Now, you might think, like my student, well, that's it. That's good enough for me. I want a historical scrape over what's already there. Or you might not. The choice is yours, as Cilla Black used to say. What's being created, think of my student, is truth here. In fact, a lot of these systems on the web, if you're inclined to believe it, have got more power to create truth than even the Roman Catholic Church in its glory days, right? I'm talking fantastic power, because this is a creation of the truth. Now you probably see why people got a grudge against me online. And I'm just doing a Columbo here. I'm not saying it's wrong, right? You know, if you like large language models, that's fine. I'm just pointing out this little detail, that it's consensus, and it's consensus on historical data. And if you think that's all there is to truth, that's fine. That's just fine. I have my doubts, though. Like Columbo, I've got a few doubts about this. That's all. I'm not trying to make any trouble.
Oh, this is building our echo chamber, isn't it? This is building the echo chamber of, you know, you believe whatever you believe, and you talk into the thing, and you hear reaffirmation of what you believe,
yeah,
which makes your truth more truthful.
Yep.
Which is why we're so divided.
Yeah, you need that talk on what is truth.
Yeah, please.
And also, well, anyway. So, responsibility for cloud-based AI. Who can be held responsible? Well, what I think is everybody. We all are. Hence my be good boys and girls, right? Because you're all playing in this, either as a consumer of web-based facts, or as a generator of web-based facts, usually both, in complex and multiple ways. And bear in mind, even if you never put any content on the web, traffic analysis is still generation of data. So just knowledge of what you've looked at and when and how much generates lots of usable data for LLMs. In fact, most people don't, I mean, I'm talking to a techie audience here, so you can get your head around this. Most people think if they never actually consign any content to the web, then they've not made a contribution. They don't know traffic analysis. And traffic analysis often yields more information than content. And trust me, everyone's doing traffic analysis. You see why I say calling it the Wild West is rather generous. Well, I don't know how much you know about the West. Wasn't really like Hollywood, and a lot of the Hollywood myth is to justify high rates of murder in eastern cities, and there was a higher rate of death per head of population in Boston than in Tombstone in 1880. I'm just saying, just giving you some facts. You can Google it if you don't believe me, see what the consensus on the web is. But the West wasn't all that wild. I think we're looking at something rather worse. Including the undeclared cyber war. Right? And you might think, Mike's looking at me puzzled here. So I'll tell another interesting story. I mean, last century, if I went to a conference on AI where there were military people in uniform, and I said, as I would, I think the next war is going to be a cyber war, right? They'd speak to me over lunch and say, how do you know that? That's classified. Right? And I'll say, oh, I'm just guessing, right? First decade of this century, right, if I said that, they'd say, what do you mean next war? It's already started, right? And I assume you know that declared or not, things are pretty bad, right? There is a cyber war going on. That's why we all need three-factor authentication and so on. Personal gripe of mine, right? I had an argument with Imperial, right? And they said I needed three-factor, a phone to get a code and Okta or some app to get a further code. And I said, I'm not doing anything secret. I'm an ethicist. Everything I do, I'm an academic as well. Everything I do is for the world to see. I have no secrets. All I want to do is read my email. I'm not on the spectrum. I don't get off with all this code word and password and secret numbers and tokens. And I really don't want to do it, right? And you know what I was told? Academic email addresses are in great demand by spammers. Right? I must put this in a paper. So that means people who are in the lie business want my email address because I'm in the truth business. Sad world, isn't it? But this is what's going on. A better comparison than the Wild West, I think, is the golden age of piracy, because there's a lot of things going on. Right, so we've got plain old-fashioned crime. If you're hacked, it could be just a bunch of greedy people out to take whatever you've got that's worth hacking. It doesn't happen at all. Maybe you all know that the UK's largest car manufacturer was not able to produce as a result of a cyber attack. I don't know who did it, and I'm not even going to speculate because I need to sell this slide to you. But it's cost 1.9 billion, is that right? That's a fair old heist. And that's a car manufacturer, something that, back in the last century was called a metal bashing industry. Why they need to be on the web at all is a mystery to me, right? Because they're just making cars, right? And I've got a Land Rover that makes no concessions to any form of electronics. None whatsoever. Right? It literally is metal bashing, but now they can be stopped to the tune of 1.9 billion. Could be old-fashioned crime, or it could be licensed crime. Letters of marque were what, I don't know if Elizabeth I was the first head of state to do this, the first ruler to do this, but basically he's giving permission to pirates. Right? And this was fine for England, made England rich, right? She basically gave permission for people like Frank Drake to stop Spanish ships and take the gold, right? And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot I can't say while I'm on camera, but I think we know that that some of this is tolerated to various degrees by not one, but several countries. Right? It's definitely tolerated crime. And last of all, there's direct state action. It's sabotage of critical systems because there's a war. Right? There is a cyber war. And it's not going to be, no one's going to take me and say, how do you know that? because we're deep in it. And I don't predict it stopping anytime soon. In fact, I only predict it getting worse. You see what I mean? Okay, last but not least, who knows about the March of Lords? English history. Anybody know any English history? Well, all right, let me talk about this historically, because you got the date right, was 1984, before most of you were born, I would think. But anyway, somebody called Blay Whitby published a paper called AI. Look at the title, Some Immediate Dangers. And if they were immediate in 1984, guess what they are now? I mean, they're a bit late now, frankly. I pointed out two dangers, only two in that paper. The first of which I'd like to share with you in 2025, which is AI is a powerful technology. We must guard against it falling into the hands of an elite. Now, back in 1984, I didn't really have any concept of just how small that elite would be. But I think you all know that in terms of owning the technology, getting the benefits from it, running it, in a very hands-on way too, not by committee, we're talking about what, 10 or a dozen, coincidentally all white men? I'm not going to name anybody. Well, I will name a few in a minute. But it has fallen into the hands of an elite, and you know who I mean. The other danger was that humans are very adaptable and technology isn't, so the humans would have to adapt to the technology and start behaving more like AI. Whether or not you think that's happened, you must decide. But they were the two immediate dangers in that paper. Now, the March of Lords, bit of English history. You need to stay in more, read some books. Because there's not much about this on the web. Right, there's a myth that you probably got at school, which was that Duke William the Bastard won a battle just down the road at Hastings. Battle near Hastings. And then after that, the English were very happy to be ruled by the Normans, in spite of them speaking a different language. And we had 1,000 years of peace and democracy. Right? Actually, the truth is a little more nuanced than that. Right? So they couldn't take over the country just on the virtue of one battle. Some pretty harsh things had to be done. The Saxon aristocracy was executed, dispossessed, or generally pushed out. The country was divided between 180 Norman lords, a lot of whom still owned the country. Some of their descendants still sit in the House of Lords. And our king, Charles III, is only king by virtue of claiming descendants from Duke William the Bastard. Right? Just so you know. Well, in the Welsh marches, they had a particular problem. And in fact, if you look around, you see the Norman conquest in action. So many castles. Why did they have to build stone castles? Well, that was to tell the English people who was in charge now, and so they can maintain an army. But the most violent and aggressive, or militaristic, should we say, rather than aggressive, most militaristic lords were given territories in the Welsh marches, in other words, the border with Wales, because if the Welsh had got their act together, many times they could have successfully invaded, right? But for one reason or another, it didn't happen. But the March of Lords had more privileges than the average Norman lord. They could build castles without getting the king's permission. They could raise armies. They could raise taxes. So in the marches, they were pretty independent. In fact, one of the stories, probably apocryphal, but a story I particularly like, because it will do for a 2025 analogy, is that a messenger turned up from London with a proclamation from the king to one of the March of Lords, right? Who made him stand in the Great Hall and eat the proclamation, wax seal and all, with the words, "The king's writ does not run in the marches." That's how much independence they had. Why do I think that's relevant now? because I don't need to stretch my imagination to imagine Lord Mark Zuckerberg saying the FBI has no jurisdiction in the metaverse. I can really see him saying that. And in case you think I'm picking on Zuckerberg and Meta as just one example, let's not forget that it was Apple who actually said no to the FBI. We will not unlock an iPhone, which was, which was gathered by the FBI in the course of an anti-terrorism act, right? Was an iPhone belonging to a known terrorist. Right? And the contact list would have been useful to the FBI, but Apple said no. Our loyalty to our customers is greater than our loyalty to the FBI. Right? And most people in Silicon Valley, the modern equivalent of the Welsh Marshes, agreed with them. They thought Apple had done the right thing to say no to the FBI. So I'm not picking on anyone, right? So what I'm saying is this elite that control things, everybody knows they've got too much power. Everybody knows they're stupendously rich, but we also know that they are holding the border against a certain country that I understand legally I'm not allowed to criticize. That is the law, because the law applies in all countries of the world. So I must be bound by it, and I'm an ethicist. I don't believe in breaking the law without good reason. So legally, I'm not allowed to criticize this country, but I think we all know that our current marcher lords are holding the borders against a certain country that'd be only too happy to move in.
Sorry, we've got quite a lot of people online.
So something, when you were showing the slide with the charter, and there was, I think it was like the third point that talked about...
Yeah. Do you want me to go back to it?
Yeah, sure. In my mind, I've registered it as loyalty to the organisation, but it's obviously not worded in that way. Yeah, respect the organisation you work for. And I guess, potentially influenced by having worked in big tech before, do you see that in the context that you're talking about with the marcher lords and what it means when people in power are not necessarily working for the public good, let's say, like, do you see that that third point there could be also challenging as well?
Yeah, and I'm not telling you which you should prioritize, right? If you're working for Meta or Apple, are you going to put their interests before the public? It's a terrible dilemma. And to their credit, some employees in Silicon Valley have made a stand and been heard, right? It is possible. And also, if you have technical expertise, you're not irrelevant in this game. It's not true that the world is full of good programmers or great system designers, right? If they all walk out, they can't easily be replaced. So, you do have power. Just saying.
There's a fundamental problem for, take the Apple example there, of I've sold you a device that's supposed to be secure and biometrically, encrypted, so therefore we shouldn't be able to decrypt the data on it. So by saying, hey, Mr. whoever's asking, and I choose to accept has the jurisdiction to override the user's privacy that they've signed up to, then I've said, well, my product doesn't actually do the thing that I said it would do. See the license agreement that said it might not work properly.
I didn't take a side on Apple versus the FBI. I just said, these people are the marcher lords, right? I can see both sides. And the irony of that is, as I understand it, a firm in Tel Aviv that specializes in hacking Apple equipment hacked it for the FBI for a reasonable fee. I'm right about that, aren't I? I'm pretty sure. I can't remember the...
The general consensus on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, the general consensus on the internet. Well, I kind of believe that's what happened. But it's very interesting both ways. And And also, you know, it's like the March of Lords. They were subject to the king, but they had an awful lot of independence for good reason. And I think, you know, again, in this situation out here, they have an awful lot of independence for good reason.
Apple did just roll over for us, right?
Yeah,
They removed
yeah,
the ISAPs, no questions asked.
yeah.
I think they're back into kowtowing.
Well, who knows what they've been threatened with?
Well, Tim has given Trump little gold statuettes, hasn't he? So.
Yeah. They're not holding out against their government at the moment. Oh, sorry, their king. We're talking lords and a king here. We're talking a feudal system. Let's be realistic about it. I think we're talking feudalism, and feudalism's the best way of looking at it. I also think that the best way of looking at the situation is as in the golden age of piracy. Right? As far as you're concerned, you know, are you going to be hacked? Yeah, you know you'll be hacked if you don't take precautions against it. So almost every merchant ship carried cannon to fight off pirates. Right? But, right, say an East Indiaman, a big East Indiaman bringing Indian riches back to Britain might have 50 guns, but they'd probably try and lose 25 of them for more profit, get more cargo on. Yeah, it's this balance, security against profit. And I'll gently suggest that Jaguar Land Rover took a decision in that area, a balance of profit, and because, you know, cybersecurity is not going to come cheap, like having extra cannons on your ship. Should I be winding up? I'm probably not allowed to name. Years ago, I was threatened with dismissal if I ever again put a quote from a popular song on the screen, right? It's a long story. You can ask me the story. It's called the Percy Sledge story. And it's a long time ago at a university far away, well, North London, but anyway. So always it's expected on me to put the words to a popular song on the screen. And when I thought about this, I thought I'd go for the obvious, which is Joni Mitchell, Both Sides Now. But no, I've got to apologize for my talk and go with Johnny Nash, 1972. That was the year I made my first solo, if you're interested. There are more questions than answers. And I'm sorry about that, but it's a difficult situation, and I don't foresee it being resolved anytime soon. For anyone who has been, thank you for listening.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was listening. I was making notes for questions. The elite isn't all white men. There's Daniela Modi and Anthropic, and there's also DeepSeek. And speaking of DeepSeek and China, I assume you were not talking about, unless it was Russia, but probably China.
Well, my understanding of the law, sir, is that the Communist Party of China has passed a law that says it's an offence, a punishable offence, to criticise the Communist Party of China in any way. And what's interesting about this law is that it doesn't apply only in China. It applies to every human being in the world. Therefore, I am bound by it. We could go on by this. Because I'm the person who does 20 miles an hour because that is the speed limit. And you'll all say, oh, but it's not enforced in Brighton. Big deal, right? If you're saying you should only comply with laws that are enforced, I can't endorse that ethical principle. So I will break the law if you give me a reason to, and I suspect you're going to.
So, I mean, another non-white man is the person or people who founded DeepSeek, and China. China do have a different model because they don't want to let any individual capitalists get too rich, and they kind of prevent that, which I think in a way is good.
Yes.
No wonder the Lords of the Marches want to, hold the line against them, because we've let it go completely out of control, and China don't want to. That's probably a good thing. Have you seen Yanis Varoufakis talking about whether or not China's a threat? I tend to agree with him that they're much less of a threat than they're made out to be, but there you go.
I've signed a non-disclosure agreement, actually in the presence of one person you've mentioned, so I can't say too much, or I shouldn't. I think you're probably right in that we're making China to be a threat that it possibly isn't. And their model, their alternative model, could, it has a lot to recommend it, because we've created, in the modern March of Lords, we've created people who behave in a really tyrannical way.
Yes.
You keep using that word "we." I don't think the Americans think of Europeans as "we." I know that Trump doesn't. So I don't feel.
Yeah,
I also don't feel existentially threatened.
I'm glad
by
you
Xi
mentioned
Jinping.
that. One of the best organisations to work for is the European Commission, because they take a very different attitude. But again, I haven't signed a non-disclosure agreement with the all-party parliamentary group on AI. Nothing that happens there is secret, so I can share with you, and you probably deduce this, that the government's policy in this country is too bad for artists, copyright holders, anyone who gets their data scraped. We have to encourage the AI industry. And I was in a lot of the debates, and a lot of artists were passionate that what was going on was wrong and was ruining them with a living. And I saw ministers weighing it up and coming down on the side of the AI industry. Have I said too much? I don't think so. No. That's not secret.
I think across all areas there's that whole feedback loop problem now, isn't there? I mean, you can argue that you go and listen to some music somewhere, you go and compose some music, you've been influenced by the music, and I know that's one of the sort of arguments being used. I mean, we were talking about the models, and there's, if I invent a gun, I'm not shooting people. If I invent a model, the vision of truth that it has is the data that it's learning from, which is the data that's already out there, not the model necessarily. So again, I think there's this sort of dual responsibility. And can people stop writing blogs that are fed off of AI because we just keep reinforcing those things?
Well, and it's a bit like Kieran's point. One of the few principles in technology ethics that's really useful is Kranzberg's first law. Do you all know this? Kranzberg M, 1986, I think. So much easier if you use AI. I'm having to use my memory. There are 6 laws, but his first law is essentially technology of itself is never good or bad or neutral. It's always all 3, depending how we use it. And I've tried to think of exceptions, I've tried to argue against it, but I think, forget the other laws, that is absolutely correct. And I don't hold technologists responsible for delivering the technology, or not usually anyway. We've got to look at the people who use it, right? And we've got to look at some of the things that were mentioned. The capitalism model, in other words, it's all about profit. Even when you're doing things that, you don't need to hire an ethicist to know that some of the algorithms designed to produce addiction are unethical. I mean, we all know this now. It's not even controversial, right? We're talking about keeping it out of the hands of teenagers, right? Because we know it's bad, right? But of course, we're all so mature, we can handle it. Maybe not. Because people don't know when they're being suckered, but it's very easy to press the emotional buttons with human beings, and it's being done because you get more profit that way. And I'm sorry, it's not ethical. And
it's ethical if you think that your greatest ethical duty is to make money, I mean, allegedly for your shareholders, but really for you.
Okay, well, I don't think that.
But some people would claim that they do or do.
I think, I'm not sure how deeply embedded in capitalism that is. Certainly Milton Friedman said that, but it's a recent departure, And I think, you know, how can I prove to you that your only duty is not to your shareholders? I can do it in 2 words. Thames Water.
If there's anyone online who wants to ask a question, feel free to pop it on the comment section as well. Any other ones from the room? No, that's fine. I am looking forward to the session in the pub where we get to hear more stories offline.
You want more? So I've got lots more stories. I was there.
Okay. Thank you very much
Can I sit down now?
Thank you very much for an insightful session. Right, thank you very much everyone for joining, and thank you very much for a little bit of history. I felt like it was like a headway where you got the Cliff Notes version, if anyone's old enough for Cliff Notes, in regards to all these different books. And if anything, I would love to find out a little bit more, especially the publications from earlier on about AI.
They're not on the web.
Are they not on eBay?
Well, they predate the web, you see. And a lot of stuff that was written...
Sorry, you've got my...
yeah, a lot of stuff that was written before the web never made it online. Just so you know. Just so you know. The world didn't start with the web.
Are they not a hard drive that you can print out and like sign and...
Maybe. I wrote this. I wrote that on a typewriter, which is a sort of machine that printed onto paper directly as you pressed keys, because you won't remember. I wrote this on an Amstrad 512 PC. 512K was cutting edge in '86 when I did it, so maybe I could find an electronic copy of that. I've got a paper copy. Oh, I've got a story about the paper copy too. I went online to buy a second-hand copy of this book, Handbook of Professionalism. I bought a used copy, and when it arrived, it had been in a library, right? So I looked, it's all stamped up in the library, White Sands Missile Base. So the US military may not listen to me, but at least they had my book in their library. You know, it's not interesting.
Okay, for those of you who are joining online, we'll say goodbye to you, and hopefully see you next time over the new year for an exciting lineup of what we have in store for 2026. But thank you very much, and for everyone else here, we've got some more pizzas and drinks, and no doubt we'll be going around to, is it Unbarred around the corner? For some drinks and some stories offline. Thank you very much for joining us.